Hey everybody, I'm super excited about today's lesson because it's all about giving you the mental framework that I use to create my AI agents and automations. And I think this is super important because all of these guides and all these tutorials about how to build these different AI workflows aren't really about building these AI workflows. They're about giving you the skills and tools to go out there and eventually build your own solutions that work for you. And so to do that at the beginning, yeah, you need to follow step-by-step guides. You need to get the reps in to understand how it all works. But the real goal of this isn't just to keep giving you random lessons that may or may not work for you. The goal of this is to take you from somebody who sees something like this, right? This giant LinkedIn scraper, and no longer asks, how did he build that? But you start to look at it and you ask, why? Why did he make certain decisions about the modules he used? Why is he using Google Sheets instead of Airtable? Why does it flow the way it flows? And when you graduate from someone who looks at these workflows and looks at the automations and goes from saying how to saying why, you are now going to be in the position to start actually building these things yourself. And that's what it's all about. It's not about keeping you a student forever, although you should always be trying to learn more. It's about making you a true practitioner in this no-code AI space that frankly wasn't available to any of us just a few years ago, but now you really have the chance to start building things that work. And so to help you get there, I'm going to go through this framework because I think it helps to see how other people think about these things, right? I essentially do this for a living now. And so hopefully when you see how I think about all this stuff, you can start thinking about these workflows the same way whenever you see them. And so for our use case, we're going to be going through the LinkedIn scraper workflow. I created this one about a week ago. It's the one that won the community vote in the Skool in April of like what you guys wanted to see, right? You guys wanted to see some sort of enhanced outreach engine. And this is what I came up with. Well, how did I come up with? What were the steps? Well, let's start with step number one, which is defining success. So step number one of this framework is define success. What are we actually trying to build and what is our explicit end state? By knowing what we're going to start with and knowing what we're going to end with, we can actually break down this workflow into separate parts that we can attack distinctly. And so while this may seem kind of obvious, yeah, I know what I want to build, sometimes it isn't, right? In this case, I was given a prompt essentially by the school, which was create an enhanced outreach generation machine. Now, what the heck does that mean? I have no idea. That could have been 3,000 different workflows and a million different iterations. And what I broke it down to was it needs to be some sort of customized outreach messaging at scale, right? Customized outreach messaging at scale. Now that's a little more defined, but we can go further with that, right? What do we actually mean by customized, right? We're trying to reach out to individuals and some sort of call to outreach. So I probably want individual information about them. Well, how am I going to do that? I'm going to need some sort of LinkedIn info, right? And I also probably want to know some stuff about their company to give their personal information some context, right? So I need company info. I also need a way to combine all that information. So I need some sort of like AI synthesis, right? And I'm going to also need to combine that with my own personalized offer for them, right? So I need the personal information, the company information, my own offer as an individual, and AI needs to synthesize all that. It needs to then do the outreach. So in this case with email, like Gmail, but what if I wanted to go really scale, like use Resend or MailChimp? And then I also need a place to store all this information, right? I want to be able to look at everything I collect. So like, what are we using as some sort of database, you know? So just right there, by kind of talking through that, we now have like 5 different areas that I know I need to figure out before I've even put anything down on proverbial paper, right? And if you kind of look at this, workflow, this is kind of how it's broken up, right? In the red and the blue, that's all kind of the LinkedIn information, right? We're doing scraping on the URLs and the profiles themselves. Green is the company information, right? This is where we're using Tavily to search for that. So we've gotten the first 2 parts, right? LinkedIn and company info. All along the way, we see some sort of AI synthesis, right? On all these different OpenAI modules, right? We have 4 different ones. And then outreach, yeah, you see that over here with the email generation section in the purple. And then in terms of a database, we see Google Sheets all over the place here, right? Now, Google Sheets is probably the most basic form of a database you can get, but we do, throughout this, figure out a way to answer all 5 of these questions. And so that's why defining success as step number 1 is so important, right? We need to be able to break this down into different small chunks, because if you try to just attack customized outreach messaging at scale, especially if you're new to the space, it's going to be way too overwhelming. So define success, break it down into chunks, And also, most importantly, this isn't something you need to do on your own, right? You're not sitting here with just pen and paper and hoping this just comes to you out of thin air. You need to be working with AI with this. And so for me, the AI of choice is Gemini 2.5, right? If you use the AI Studio one, it's A, completely free, and B, it's really, really good when it comes to N8N. The only one that's even close is Claude, but if you're using like Claude's that like the Claude version on the web, you're gonna run through your tokens and you're gonna get locked out after an hour and have to sit there waiting to do something for the next 3. On the other hand, this is free, context window is huge, and you're never gonna get kicked off. So I can't recommend enough having these conversations about A, what you're trying to build and how can we break this down into like small manageable steps with something like Gemini. That being said, if ChatGPT has you in a chokehold and you refuse to change it up, ChatGPT works too. So that's step 1. Define success. What do we want to build? How do we break it down? And what does AI have to say about all this, right? That's where we start. Now let's go into step 2. So step number 2 is, can we steal it? Now I say this only half jokingly because once we define what we want to build and we've kind of articulated that, now I want you to go to AI. I want you to go to something like Perplexity and ask if there's any examples out there of templates that people have done that's kind of similar to what you're trying to do. And that's exactly what you see here in this Perplexity search that I did, right? When I was originally starting that automation, I was like, okay, I want to do something with lead generation. I know people have used stuff like Apollo before. Like, do you have any examples of people doing this? Now, the goal here isn't for me to find some perfect template out there that does exactly what I'm asking for. And then I'm going to say, oh, I built this. This is mine. For 2 reasons. One, we're not going to steal other people's work. But number 2, and more importantly, you're not going to find a template out there that's going to do exactly what you want to do almost ever, right? Especially when you're talking about specific use cases for like you or your business, right? It's just not going to exist. But what you can find are 50, 60, 70% solutions that can kind of get the gears turning in your mind and hopefully give you some inspiration of how you should attack your particular problem. And so what you see here is a template that I found on Reddit of someone who was doing lead generation, right? They were using a lot of Apollo, and they were also doing some LinkedIn scraping versus AI with Amplified, but this is what they got. Now, this thing and, this thing are very different, but there are some ideas in here that I lifted and put into mine, namely like how they approached the LinkedIn section, right? What you see here is actually not too different than what you see from mine in the blue. Now, I cut up a lot of things. I changed system prompts, right? I tweaked it into my own vision. But by seeing what this guy did, I was able to be like, okay, cool, that's a good idea. And when you're able to do that and look at something like this and not ask, how did he do it, but ask why, right? And then click into something here and look in a system prompt and be like, okay, I see what he did. Can I do something better? Or can I tweak this a little bit to my own thing? That's what you need to start doing, right? You get into other people's templates, you start asking the why, and then you're like, okay, here's my end goal, here's my case. Let me bring it to AI and see if they have any other ideas to add on to it, right? So step 2 is go find similar stuff, right? There's more and more stuff on YouTube. There's more and more stuff on Reddit, also on the actual N8N site of templates that may be kind of close to what you want to do. And again, we're not stealing work here. We're looking for inspiration. We're seeing what other people have done, right? Don't be afraid to stand on the shoulders of other N8N giants, right? And see what people who are more experienced in the space are doing, right? Because you're going in here, and again, you've gone from how to now you're asking why. So to recap, big tools here, Perplexity, right? And then as for places you can actually find it, Reddit has some stuff sometimes. The actual N8N official website has a whole like marketplace. Some people actually sell theirs, but there's a lot of free ones that, again, can kind of like get the juices flowing to see what you're doing. And then YouTube's also obviously a great place. And then step 3, we're actually going to start building one feature at a time, right? We're going to start small and we're going to keep it lean. When we look at something like this, right? This entire behemoth, right? I want to build this very sophisticated cold outreach program that people can put in whatever query they want. It does all this stuff and it doesn't do duplicates. That's a lot to do, especially at first. So how do you need to like mentally approach it? Well, first, you're going to do one lead at a time and you're not going to worry about strange edge cases, right? So what you see right here in the red, right? We have this thing that right off the bat, we're already splitting off into 3 parts, right? We get existing URLs. This helps us deal with duplicates. This down here helps us deal with edge cases where someone asks for the same like thing that they did yesterday. Crazy stuff. We're not going to start worrying about that. We're actually going to like, when we first start this, we're not doing this. We're not doing any of this. All we're worried about is I got a form submission and somebody asked for software company founder in Chicago. It shows 10. Maybe I just want to do 1. And what we're also going to do is we're going to constantly be pinning data. What you see up here is this little pin data. That means I filled out this lead form, the data came in, and I pin it so I never have to touch it again. So same thing right here, right? We push it through OpenAI. I test the data. When I get an output I want actually working, what am I going to do? I'm going to pin the data right here. Now, that does two things. One, it gives me some sort of visual indicator that this module that I've been working on now works. I don't have to mess with it anymore. But two, it saves us time as you're working on these individual pieces, and I want to test something like HTTP request over here. It's not going to run through the form submission again or even run through this message model again. It's just going to take that data that's been holding as a placeholder and push it into this request. And so every time I get an individual module working, I pin the data, move on to the next one, get it working, pin the data, and kind of slowly leapfrog my way through the workflow. And so that way, A, I just know I know the stuff that's working, which ones are working, and B, it will also save your ass when it comes to certain costs, right? Because if I have something like an OpenAI one here and I was using a very expensive model, if every time I test this workflow, I'm running through the API again and again and again, that's going to cost money, and we want to avoid that. So that's kind of a more like small scale tactical tip, but always make sure you're pinning your data, and big picture, break it up into those small chunks, which again comes back here to step one, right? I was able to define success and define what each area of success I need to like figure out, right? LinkedIn info, company info. So first things first, the LinkedIn info section. Then we go into the company info section, right? Then we synthesize it with AI. By being able to define success, you're able to put it all into manageable chunks and not get overwhelmed, which is very easy to do, especially at the beginning. So stay small and stay lean here. And then pin, pin, pin. We're always pinning data. Pin data. So define success, steal what we can, get some inspiration, start small, keep it one feature at a time. And then for our last step, it's going to be iterate, iterate, iterate. Now, the last step, iterating. What do I mean by that? Seems kind of obvious. Oh, you want me just to keep working on stuff till it works? Yeah, but more importantly, let's talk about what's actually the most important thing of this whole video, and that's troubleshooting. Because troubleshooting is huge, and it's the number one skill you need to master more than anything else. If you get nothing from this video, it's learning how to troubleshoot these sorts of workflows. And so here is your process for troubleshooting. First, you're going to give it big picture context. What is success? That's the context, right? What we defined in step one, what are we trying to do? You're going to tell AI the exact same thing. Here's my workflow. Here's what I'm trying to do. So big picture context. Next thing we're going to do is give it small context. What's small context? This is the actual problem I'm having on the specific node. Hey, I'm trying to do this within this bigger workflow. Here's what's happening. And then you're going to actually give it data. Now, what do we mean by give it data? I mean a few things. First thing you're going to do, you're going to come up here, you're going to go to download, right? That is going to download the entire JSON file, all the code behind the workflow. It's going to put it into a file, and we're going to give that file to AI, right? So then I'm just going to come to downloads. I'm going to dump it in here, and now it knows everything that's happening, big picture within the workflow, right? So I give it big picture data. And of note, you don't need to do that every time. Just do it the first time you talk to it. Now, the second thing is we're going to give it data about the problem we're actually having. Now, how do we do that? Let's say I'm having a problem here with the OpenAI module. I'm going to give AI three things. I'm going to give it the input, I'm going to give it the actual module itself, and then I'm going to give it the output. Input and output are easy. Just come over here to where it says JSON, copy it, and you're going to go in here and say, here's the input, right? Paste it in. Then you're going to say, here's the module, right? And for this, I'll actually just screenshot it all. Or if it's like a code block, I'd copy paste it all. Then I dump that into the model as well. And then I paste the output. Oftentimes this will be an error message, but same thing. There's usually a button to just copy it. And then I'll go in there, right? And say, hey, here's the error output. Paste it in. And then I'll say, like, hey, what should I do next? That's it. That's how you troubleshoot. That is the most important thing of this entire video, is knowing how to troubleshoot. And it's that simple, right? Those are the steps. Big picture context. What is the workflow? What am I trying to do? Small picture context. Here's the specific problem I'm having with the specific module. and then we give it the data. Full JSON, input, output in the module itself. And by doing that, you will slowly be able to fix your problems. Will it be fixed on the first time? Maybe, maybe not. But guess what happens if not? You're gonna do the exact same thing. Give it the new input, give it the module with the changes, give it the output, and over time, it's gonna be able to solve it for you, I promise. And then once we solve the problem with that specific module, guess what we do next? You go to the next module and you do the exact same thing. And so this whole framework becomes less of a step-by-step process and more of a loop, right? Because after I do that first model, guess what I need to do with the next module? Well, I kind of got to define success of the next module, right? What works big picture also works small here. What am I trying to do in the specific section? Has anyone done it before, right? Hey, I got through the LinkedIn scraper section. I'm trying to do the company research section, right? What do I actually want? Well, I need to scrape the internet in these parameters. Here's a third-party tool. Well, can I steal it? Has someone else done some sort of company research out there, right? Is there any templates I can kind of use or work off of? Okay, sweet, let's use that. All right, let's get one feature working at a time. Let's look at the Tavily search section, right? How do I do that? Okay, well, let's troubleshoot it's not working, right? So this is the loop. This is your little N8N OODA loop that you need to do, that you need to just also be in like thinking about this when you're going through templates yourself, even if you aren't making it, right? Because if you have this in the back of your mind when you're going through a step-by-step guide, it's going to take you from someone who sees these things and asks, how do they do it? And it's going to take you to someone who asks, why? And when you start asking why, that's when you can start, graduating to someone who can actually build these solutions for themselves. And you're no longer in the YouTube/Skool tutorial hell where you're just kind of rote memorization, repeating stuff over and over, but not actually learning, not actually retaining information, and not actually becoming someone who can leverage all this cool AI stuff. So hope that answered some questions. Hope that helped out. Like I said, this is exactly how I approach it. And again, every step of the way, AI is involved, right? It's a constant running conversation. Like I said, this was the conversation that I had with AI for that LinkedIn scraper, right? And if you look over here at the right, 400,000, almost 387,000 tokens. 387,000 tokens for somebody who, like I said, does this for a living. So someone who's very, I think, pretty knowledgeable in the N8N space, it took me 400,000 tokens of back and forth with AI to get what you see here. So don't get discouraged if you feel like you've been banging your head against the wall, because I guarantee you, I've done it way more, right? And so does everyone in the space who does these things. So you kind of have to embrace that a little bit. But yeah, as always, let me know what you thought about this, and I'll see you guys around.